Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us for the 28th webinar in the Offshore Wind Series, Learning from the Experts. My name is Ian Latimer. I'm a Senior Project Manager with NYSERDA with the Clean Energy Siting and Innovation teams. And it is my absolute pleasure to be joined by today's experts, Henrik, Nybo, Lomholt, and Kristian, Sten, Holst, both from the Danish Energy Agency, who are here to speak with us about hydrogen and offshore wind today. Now, before I introduce our speakers, I want to give a few reminders for participants and some background on the webinar series at large. Next slide, please. First, we want to go through some housekeeping procedures. If you're experiencing any technical issues throughout today's webinar, please contact my colleague, John Necroto, whose email can be found at the bottom of the slide here. This webinar is being recorded, and as always with webinars in this series, the recording and presentation slides for this webinar will be made available on the Learning from the Experts series on NYSERDA's website at the address included on the slide here. All participants have been muted, but we will have time for some Q&A following the presentations this morning. So please do make use of the Q&A function, which you can find down at the bottom right with the icon highlighted here on the screen. We encourage you to use this Q&A function. We will do our best to address the questions at the end of the presentations today. Next slide, please. As we all know, or if you don't, I'm happy to talk about it. New York State is working to advance the responsible and cost-effective development of at least 9,000 megawatts or 9 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. We know that offshore wind is a critical component in achieving the state's goals of achieving 70% renewable resources for electricity by 2030 and in 100% zero emissions electricity grid by 2040. Now, while offshore wind has been providing clean energy to other parts of the world for several decades, the industry is brand new to New Yorkers, which is why we're so grateful to have our experts here joining us today to provide interested stakeholders and members of the public with accessible, impartial, objective information and opportunities for engagement on topics of interest around offshore wind. NYSERDA has been hosting this educational webinar series called Learning from the Experts to connect the public with independent experts in key topics in offshore wind from across the industry and across the world. Now, we endeavor to select Learning from the Experts speakers based on their expertise, not necessarily for an alignment of opinions at NYSERDA or the state of New York. If you'd like to suggest a topic or speaker for a future session in this series, please email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov or fill out the survey also available on our website, nyserda.ny.gov/osw-webinar-series. Now, again, please note that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of our expert guests, not of NYSERDA or New York State. Next slide, please. Now, briefly, before I turn it over to our experts, I just want to provide some context about why we are so lucky to be graced by a couple of our colleagues from the Danish Energy Agency here. In 2018, NYSERDA signed a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with the Danish Ministry of Energy, Utilities and Climate, seeking to grow a collaborative and educational relationship between New York and Denmark, with a keen focus on offshore wind, given Denmark's decades of experience in the industry. A couple of years later, in 2021, while at COP26, the successful partnership was extended and broadened to include other technologies such as clean hydrogen, carbon capture, storage and utilization, and other innovative technologies that are in the toolkit for decarbonization across our state and the country of Denmark. Now, it's been a sincere pleasure for us to work with and learn from our colleagues in Denmark over the past couple of years, and we look forward to the continued partnership and towards the future of New York and Denmark's clean energy transitions. Now, with all of that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our two excellent speakers. I'll introduce both today before we get started here. Joining us first, we've got Henrik Nybo Lomholt, a special advisor in the Danish Energy Agency's Center for Global Cooperation. An energy engineer by training, Henrik joined the DEA in 2021, where he focuses on international collaboration on energy efficiency in industries and Power-to-X. Henrik works as the energy efficiency coordinator between the Center for Energy Efficiency and the Center for Global Cooperation, and also works on Power-to-X activities in the Center for Supply within DEA. Joining us later in this morning's presentation is Kristian Sten Holst, an energy advisor in the Danish Energy Agency's Center for Global Cooperation and the Center for Energy Islands. An electrical engineer by training, Kristian joined the DEA in January 2022. Happy anniversary, Kristian, where he focuses on international collaboration on offshore wind and Power-to-X in both Japan and the US. Kristian works as a technical coordinator between the Center for Energy Islands and the Center for Global Cooperation, focusing on electrical transmission, offshore wind planning, and Power-to-X projects involved in the Energy Islands program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first expert, Henrik. We look forward to your presentation. And again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Morning for us.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that the audio is fine.
You sound good. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, hello, everyone. My name is Henrik Nybo Lomholt, and I'm very delighted to have this opportunity to tell you about how we approach Power-to-X and green hydrogen in Denmark. In this presentation, I will give you an introduction to the Danish Energy Agency, what we mean by Power-to-X in Denmark, and how we characterize hydrogen by colors. I will highlight some of the Danish Power-to-X drivers, and I will share some energy considerations with you from which the Danish Power-to-X strategy has been based on. Finally, I will provide you with an outlook on the development of Power-to-X in Denmark. Let's get started. Next slide, please. To begin with, I will just briefly put a few more words on who we are. The Danish Energy Agency is a government agency under the Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities. My colleague Kristian Holst and we are colleagues in the Department of Global Cooperation, where we exchange knowledge between our agency and partners around the globe. Next slide, please. And who do we cooperate with? The Department of Global Cooperation has established 24 global partnerships, and where we are pleased to have a great and long-lasting collaboration with partners in the US. Our aim is to accelerate the global green transition, and our international collaboration is very important because, next slide. In Denmark, we only represent 0.07% of the world's population, and we emit 0.1% of the global CO2 emissions. Our partners represent roughly 61% of the world's population and emit roughly 70% of the global CO2 emissions. So it makes a lot of difference that we cooperate internationally, and this is also why we are very excited to have this exchange today. And moving on to the next slide, the first topic of today is Power-to-X, and the expectations to this technology is massive. And similar to the United States, we have big ambitions to include Power-to-X in our green transition. Next slide. So, what do we mean about Power-to-X? Power-to-X starts with electrolysis, where electricity is used to split water into hydrogen and oxygen through an electrochemical reaction. Other used terminologies are green hydrogen or e-fuels, which focus on the product of the process. Hydrogen is the output of the process, but it can be further processed into more dense or energy-dense fuels, and the different product routes explains the Power-to-X terminology. There are normally two different routes. The carbon-free route, where nitrogen can be combined with hydrogen to form ammonia, and also hydrogen itself is a part of this route. And there is the carbon route that enables production of carbon-based fuels and compounds, such as methanol, methane, and kerosene. Hydrogen is expected to be used in the industry and for heavy transportation. And ammonia is very likely to play a role in shipping and for producing fertilizer. Methanol, methane, and kerosene will substitute fuels across many sectors, such as shipping, aviation, and for production of plastics and chemicals. In Denmark, we also have special attention that is put on recovering surplus heat from the Power-to-X plants, which can be used for district heating. Overall, I prefer to state that Power-to-X is a process that uses green electrons as an input and produce green molecules as an output. Next slide, please. Hydrogen can be characterized by colors depending on the production method. Brown hydrogen is produced from coal, and gray hydrogen is produced from methane. Hydrogen production from these two sources emits just as much CO2 as if the fuels has been burned directly. Blue hydrogen is also based on fossil fuels, but the difference is that it's possible to recover a large amount of the CO2 from the process, capture it, and deposit it in underground storages. Green hydrogen is the focus point in the Danish strategy, where hydrogen is generated using electrolysis by electricity from renewable sources. Next slide, please. So just to give you a small introduction to some of the Power-to-X drivers. Next slide. There are a lot of reasons for why Power-to-X developers choose Denmark for their Power-to-X projects. The main reason is that the electricity prices are low and the share of renewable electricity is high. In 2020, the share of renewables in our electricity production was approximately 68%, and the security of supply is high. And on top of that, it is expected that Power-to-X facilities of production can support the scale-up of renewable electricity production. The large share of renewable electricity in the Danish energy system did not occur overnight, but has been pushed by our political agendas over decades. The short-term Danish climate goals are 100% green power production in 2030 and 70%, and we aim at 70% CO2 reduction compared to 1990. Our long-term goals has recently been revised by our new government, where the goal of carbon neutrality has been pushed to 2045 instead of 2050. And in 2050, the CO2 reduction goal has been increased to 110%, promoting export of, for example, offshore wind and Power-to-X products, supporting the global green transition. Next slide, please. In this slide, you will have an overview of, you could say, a big part of the Danish hydrogen and Power-to-X ecosystem. And this is also one of the big drivers for Power-to-X activities in Denmark. And that is that we have this well-established Power-to-X and hydrogen ecosystem with strong companies and institutions covering all sectors in the supply chain, such as renewable energy production, electrolysis and fuel cell technologies, within hydrogen infrastructure, and also synthesis technology providers, which can be used for converting hydrogen into other fuels. We also have some really competent product developers, and we have some good interest group and advisors, as well as universities and end users. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'll just give you a quick stage on Danish Power-to-X projects. Power-to-X is a new and upcoming utility sector in Denmark, but even though more than 35 projects has been announced to be implemented before the end of 2030. And the accumulated capacity of these projects is in the range of 7.5 gigawatt, and it's still rising. As late as last week, a new big project, 2 gigawatt, was also announced, which I have not taken into account. So this just tells a story about that this is an industry that is moving rapidly. So, and these projects, they range from 5 megawatts to now 2 megawatts in size. And what you can see on the chart to the right, that gives an overview of the end products, which are in focus for the Power-to-X product developers, where roughly 45% of the projects focus on hydrogen production, 20% on methanol, 5% on methane, 15% are focusing on ammonia and kerosene production, respectively. Kerosene is a fuel that is used for jet fuel. Next slide, please. Currently, we have 5 gigawatt projects that are planned to be commissioned in the period between 2026 and 2030. I've brought just one example for this presentation to highlight one very interesting project that we have in Denmark, which is called Green Fuels for Denmark. And this is a project example where a consortium of partners aim at producing hydrogen for the heavy transportation sector, methanol for shipping, and kerosene for aviation. And you can find more details about this project using the link that is provided on the slide. It's going to be really interesting to follow both this project, but also the rest of these gigawatt size projects. Let's move on to the next slide. So in this slide, I've provided some energy consideration to give you an idea about what can 1 gigawatt Power-to-X facility be used for. So let's assume that the starting point is 1 gigawatt of electricity. It can come from, let's say, offshore wind or PV or different sources. It can be used for hydrogen production, which can fuel 15,000 hydrogen trucks can deliver fuel for the annual consumption for 15,000 hydrogen trucks. If the hydrogen is processed further into, for example, ammonia or methanol or jet fuel, then 1 gigawatt of electricity can deliver energy for roughly 20% of the Danish fuel consumption for international flights, or 4 times the fuel consumption for domestic air travel. Another reference to give you an idea about how much energy content there are in a facility like this, it can also power 5 container ships, where in this example I have used Maersk EE size container ship as a reference. Beside this, you can say that a 1 gigawatt Power-to-X plant comes with a lot of other, I would say, local requirements, where I would like to emphasize on 2 requirements. And that is that they require a well-developed electrical grid and a relatively steady and large water supply. And in this example, you can also see that for generating this amount of fuel, we also require roughly 2 to 2.5 million cubic meter of water, which is equal to 0.25% of Denmark's water consumption. And you can say that these requirements can be managed, but can become a challenge on local or regional level if multiple Power-to-X developer targets the same area. Let's move on to the next slide. In this slide, I will just briefly mention some pros and cons with Power-to-X versus direct electrification. Power-to-X and green hydrogen can solve some of our emission challenges, but it's not the best solution in all cases. And this is something that we should keep in mind. And here are, let's say, 2 examples from a Danish perspective that favors the use of direct electrification. And in the first example, as seen on the right side, this is an example that shows that a hydrogen-powered vehicle roughly consumes 2 times more energy compared to a battery-powered vehicle due to conversion losses. And in the other example, we have an energy comparison that shows that a hydrogen boiler used for space heating requires approximately 5 times the energy compared to a heat pump. So even more efficient Power-to-X technologies are being developed, but direct electrification is the cheapest and most energy efficient solution and should be prioritized wherever it's possible. And you could state that if green hydrogen is applied in the wrong sectors, such as, let's say, in the heating sector, we might end up delaying the green transition because of the high capacity requirements for new renewable electricity sources. Let's move to the next slide. And next slide again. This is just to give you some glimpse and some highlights from the Danish Power-to-X strategy. The Danish Power-to-X strategy, the government's strategy for Power-to-X was released in December 2021, and it is based on 20 analyses totaling more than 500 pages. So this is also why I just would like to mention just a few of the headlines. And in this strategy, the national target aims at an installed electrolysis capacity in the range of 4 to 6 gigawatt by 2030. And what can be mentioned is that simultaneously, the Power-to-X agenda has accelerated, and we have, as mentioned earlier, a lot of announced projects that are hopefully going to be realized in Denmark within the same time frame. Next slide, please. In this slide, I will try to briefly discuss some about the competitiveness with biofuels in a medium long-term perspective. This gives you an idea about what is the business case of Power-to-X fuels and what are the competitors. There's a lot of information, and I'll try to just walk you through it. And in the first chart, in the first column, we have an estimate that is related to the near-term production cost for green hydrogen. What I would like to say with this column is that the price is mainly affected by three factors, which is the cost of the electrolysis plant, price of electricity, and also tariffs. And tariffs is the fee that has got to be paid to the grid operator in order to transport electricity over the grid. What is expected can be seen in the second column, the possible medium to long-term development, and that is, it is expected that these tariffs or fees can be reduced by constructing the Power-to-X plants close to the renewable sources, or by using direct transmission lines between the renewable sources and the Power-to-X plants. The price of the electrolysis plant itself is also expected to drop, benefiting from large-scale production. So it's therefore estimated that the medium to long-term cost of green hydrogen can be reduced around 40%. And I've made some quick estimation of what these prices means in an American context. And in the first scenario, I think that the 125 Danish kroner per gigajoule corresponds to roughly $2.3 per kilogram of hydrogen. And our long-term perspective focuses on the price that we think could be realistic is $1.4 per kilogram of hydrogen. In the second chart on the right side, it illustrates the competitiveness of Power-to-X fuels with fossil fuels and with biofuels in a medium to long-term perspective. And I think that the first conclusion here is that I would say complicated e-fuels such as e-ammonia and e-methanol and e-kerosene cannot compete with fossil fuels on medium term or long term, if ever. What can be seen from the chart is what I should try to emphasize is that the long-term price prediction has been taken from the chart to the left and put to the chart to the right, so you can see the comparison with other competitors. And it is expected that the cost of hydrogen from Power-to-X production might compete with fossil fuels in the long run, and it can be seen that fuels like ammonia and methanol, as well as aviation fuel, can compete with second-generation biofuels in the long run. So another thing that also should be noted is that Power-to-X is a new utility sector, and there's a lot of great potential, but there are also a lot of uncertainties when it comes to predicting future production costs. Let's move to the next slide. In this slide, I will try to, from the business case perspective, try to explain from a Danish perspective, where do we believe that Power-to-X is going to be utilized? Where do we see the benefits from a Danish perspective? And the figure in the right side is going to give you an idea about where we believe that Power-to-X is going to play a significant role. And the figure, it kind of illustrates the transition potential, where the blue bar indicates where direct electrification is expected to have a dominant position, and the red bars where Power-to-X or biofuels will have an advantage. And it's fairly certain that Power-to-X will have a leading position within shipping and aviation. The development is a bit more uncertain in other sectors, such as land-based transportation, industry, agriculture, and defense. It's probably going to be a mix of both direct electrification and Power-to-X. But what is more certain is that it's expected that Power-to-X will play or have no role in related to heating or for electricity generation in Denmark, as cheaper options already exist. And these options are for, as already described, heat pumps for space heating, but also for district heating, and biogas for electricity production. Let's move to the next slide. I have 2 more slides where I would like to just wrap up. Let's move to the next slide. First, I would like to kind of wrap up and give some, let's say, general recommendations to Power-to-X. And these are general recommendations that we kind of share with all our international collaboration partners. And we would like to emphasize from a Danish perspective that we believe that renewable electricity is used most efficiently for direct electrification, both in terms of energy and economically as well. And we believe that Power-to-X should contribute to the green transition, and this is also why we have a strong focus on green hydrogen. And the third recommendation is that Power-to-X is suitable for countries with a high share of renewable electricity and well-developed grid. And as a last recommendation, we tend to emphasize the countries with a high CO2 intensity should prioritize renewable electricity production first, because you get the more benefit from your investment from a CO2 perspective. Let's move to the last slide. So just to give you a glimpse of a recent forecast, and this also can be used to say that our recommendation, we also apply them in Denmark as well, because here you can see a forecast on how the Danish Energy Agency expect the rollout of Power-to-X in Denmark, where we expect that the requirement for green electricity in 2030 is going to be in the range of 5 gigawatt in 2030 and 17 gigawatt in 2040. In the blue line, you can see some of the Danish Power-to-X developers who are a bit more optimistic, expecting 14 gigawatt in 2030 and 21 in 2040. What is certain is that there will be significant requirements for new renewable electricity sources powering this new power-to-X sector. And this was my last slide. My colleague Kristian Holst will now give you a presentation on how Energy Iceland can be a significant part of the solution of delivering power for or electricity for these power-to-X plants. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Henrik. As mentioned, my name is Kristian, and I will now be discussing the Danish Energy Islands for the next presentation. First of all, is my sound okay going through as intended?
You sound great. Thanks, Kristian.
Perfect. Then I'd like to welcome you to the second presentation of today. I'm very happy to be here. And as one of the people responsible for the Energy Islands in Denmark, it's a great pleasure to be sharing some of the details about this project with you here today. Next slide, please. We will be building 2 energy islands, one in the Baltic Sea and one artificial one in the Nordic Sea. The construction of the North Sea Energy Island will be the largest infrastructure project in the entire history of Denmark. And the overall aim of the Energy Islands is to ensure that Denmark can electrify more areas of society in a greener way in the next coming years, and to help ensure that the electricity consumption of all Danish households and businesses is met with green electricity. Energy from the Energy Islands can be exported to our neighboring countries and contribute to the green transition all across Europe. We also see this as a big export opportunity. Next slide, please. We see this as a paradigm shift of the renewable energy sector, especially when it comes to offshore wind. The Energy Island project draws on the extensive Danish experience within offshore wind. Denmark has been a pioneer in developing wind power projects since the 1970s. And Denmark and Danish companies rank amongst some of the best in the world when it comes to development, production, and installation of wind turbines. Furthermore, Denmark was the first country in the world to install an offshore wind farm, Vindeby, that recently closed, and do it on large scale with the Horns Reef 1 project installed in 2002. So the establishment of the Energy Islands, or the Energy Island in the North Sea as an artificial island, will be a completely new concept and for capture, distribution and utilization of power from offshore wind on an unprecedented scale. The build out of the offshore wind in the North Sea will contribute to future electrification of Denmark and Europe, where a much larger share of energy consumption must come from renewable energy sources. By working together on cross-border energy projects and technological integration, we take action on offshore wind development and synchronization of the power grid in both Baltic and North Sea region. And of course, this will require a lot of strong collaboration between the TSOs to ensure the optimal grid planning as well. Next slide, please. Of course, a project like this will require some heavy political support. Here you see multiple prime ministers from Belgium, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands joined together for what we call the Esbjerg Declaration, ensuring this project goes well across borders. They joined together in order to comply with the common set climate goals for 2050, where the EU has a strategy on offshore renewable energy to increase the capacity from the current level of 12 gigawatt to at least 60 gigawatt by 2030 and to 300 gigawatt by 2050. The North Sea in general has high and widespread natural potential for offshore wind, thanks to the shallow waters almost all over the entire North Sea. Next slide, please. So the long-term vision here, or in Europe, is multiple energy islands connected and connecting multiple European countries, as well as a large-scale power project, as Henrik mentioned in the previous presentation. So now we need regional cooperation to realize the full potential of the offshore wind in Europe. So the European Commission strongly supports this regional cooperation that's needed for these initiatives. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned, the Energy Island also serves as a multi-international interconnector system, and we need to collaborate close with foreign countries in order to make this connection ready within the time frame that we have. Currently, the negotiations between the TSOs are currently ongoing. So for the sake of time, I will not dive further into this for this presentation, but feel free to ask questions about it in the Q&A section afterwards. Next slide, please. So what is our role in this project as an energy agency? The Danish Energy Agency plays a central role in planning and securing political support for the energy islands. And we, as an agency, will plan and coordinate the tender material in collaboration with the potential bidders of the project. And then furthermore, we aim to share our experience and knowledge of energy islands with our partners around the globe. Next slide, please. So more specific, these energy islands will be located two places. On your left-hand side here, you see the placement of the North Sea Energy Island, 100 kilometers west of the coast of Jutland in Denmark. And on your right-hand side, you see the one in the Baltic Sea, just south of the island of Bornholm. Next slide, please. This also requires a lot of environmental studies that are currently ongoing. That involves both geotechnical service like seabed drilling, but also environmental studies and surveys for fish, bats, and birds. And these studies are already undergoing, and the results from these will be a part of the strategic environmental assessment and become a part of the tender material for the energy island. Next slide, please. In collaboration with our TSO Energinet, the Danish Energy Agency is carrying out fine screening of the optimum sites for the upcoming energy islands and future wind farms in Denmark at once. These reports has been prepared to identify possible placements ahead of the final decision on offshore wind placement in the North Sea, and all these reports are available in English at our webpage if you are interested in learning more. Next slide, please. So diving into the energy islands themselves. First of all, I would like to present here the energy island of Bornholm, where the island itself is already existing. And initially 2 gigawatt was planned with the set date of 2030, but the target has already been increased to a final amount of 3 gigawatt offshore wind capacity connecting to Zealand with the capital region of Denmark, and then also to Germany. The Bornholm Energy Island is expected to convert a lot of its green electricity to synthetic e-fuels through the Power-to-X process, as Henrik has described. but of course also transmitted to meet the increase of electricity demand in Denmark and surrounding countries. Next slide, please. Here you see a visualization of the North Sea Energy Island. That's the one I primarily is working on, and that's going to be a flexible artificial island concept. And the entire system will contain of one central island and then multiple substations surrounding it. And this will serve as one common hub for the offshore wind farms surrounding the island. And even though the original target was an initial 3 gigawatts in the earliest phase, we are aiming or working on increasing that to 4 gigawatts by 2033 and 10 gigawatts by 2040. The architecture of the island will combine the on-island transmission platforms situated around the island, as mentioned. The energy island have a potential to become a hub for energy storage or for conversion of green electricity into green fuels for heavy transport, such as aviation and shipping through Power-to-X, as Henrik has already talked about. And of course, we hope this will give us the ability to scale energy islands as a concept globally. Next slide, please. So diving into the business model of the North Sea Energy Island. So what will the economical setup look like? First of all, this energy island as an artificial island will include a private partner. So when the framework for the procurement and the construction of the islands are determined through several market dialogues and open procurement process, the Danish state will enter into a partnership with private sector actors on the ownership of the artificial islands in the North Sea. The Danish state will be majority owner and own at least 50.1% of the island itself, but none of the wind farm surrounding. The wind farms surrounding the energy islands will be 100% owned by the wind developers. This will only be relevant for the North Sea Energy Island since Bornholm is already an existing island, so there will be no public-private partnership for that one. The revenues from the energy hub project here in the North Sea will primarily originate from the offshore wind parks, sale of electricity, and the TSO's associated income with that. The energy island may also potentially offer other services, such as Power-to-X or energy storage on large scale. Next slide, please. What you see here on this slide is the preliminary timetable for the North Sea. In the North Sea, we are working with 3 phases. First of all, the establishment of the island, then the establishment of the transmission network, and lastly, the establishment of the offshore wind farms. The phases are overlapping where it's possible here. Right now, we are working in close dialogue with the market and potential bidders to gather input, and all of these input we get will then be part of shaping the conditions for the upcoming tender. To ensure a long-term engineering partner, we will shortly initiate a public procurement process for technical service, and it will be a non-exclusive framework agreement to support the design and tender and realization of the energy island in the North Sea. And we hope there will be a lot of international interest for this. Yes, next slide, please. So this was my introduction. I hope there is a lot of questions. I know some of the things discussed today was touched upon briefly, but if there's anything you would like to ask, I think both Henrik and I is available for questions.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, we definitely have some questions coming in. I'll encourage all attendees to continue in the next few minutes to make use of the Q&A function if you haven't already. But we do have a number of questions coming in that I'm happy to facilitate some Q&A for you two gentlemen. Real quick before we do, someone had asked again about the availability of these slides, and I just want to confirm we will make them available alongside a recording of the webinar on the NYSERDA website. So rest assured, you will be able to revisit some of this very interesting and complex material. Maybe a couple of questions we can start out with, and we had a couple of questions that came in that I'm trying to sort of wrap up into one, which really is about sort of project configuration and how this equipment might be sited onshore versus offshore. Was curious to sort of get either of your perspectives or both of your perspectives on how Denmark might be thinking about project configuration. And what I mean by that, for some of the attendees here, there's talk in the industry about opportunities for offshore wind to power onshore hydrogen production or hydrogen production at the turbine or a centralized location offshore. So curious if you can talk a little bit about how you guys are evaluating opportunities for project configuration, particularly when it comes to siting components or equipment onshore versus offshore.
I can go ahead, Kristian, if it's okay with you. I would say to give you a short, very broad answer, because it's difficult to give you a straightforward answer. I think that all of these scenarios are open. There are some pros and cons between the different solutions when it comes to generating hydrogen offshore or onshore. And I would say that all the scenarios are open. It seems like that if you generate the hydrogen offshore, it's going to be cheaper to transport the fuel to shore or to whoever is going to consume it. But again, you also kind of lose some flexibility of, let's say, your electrolysis plants, because they can, if there's no, let's say, no wind, you cannot have them running. Having them onshore, you can also use electricity from other sources, and even though that it's a bit more could be costly to utilize to produce it onshore, then it's also a possibility. And I think that a lot of people are working on both scenarios. And if I should come up with a guess, I would estimate that we will probably have project developers who will aim at both directions, depending on how you're going to build this system. So it's not a straight forward answer. I'm sorry about that. I don't know, Kristian, if you have any other comments to this question.
Yes, thank you, Henrik. It's a very interesting discussion, because the main problem is that the technology is not mature enough on large scale, at least, to say that one of these two are the winning technology. Personally, I expect in the far future that we will see or start to see hydrogen turbine producing on-site hydrogen, and then using what's it called, the more efficient way of transporting energy through hydrogen pipeline on large scale, instead of having a lot of electrical equipment to then put onshore and then do the conversion into hydrogen onshore. So it can save a lot of costly electrical equipment to do it in the turbine directly. But unfortunately, that technology is not mature enough, so we don't expect, when at least constructing the energy islands, to lock us into one technology. We would like to keep that open and then let the industry decide. At least that's the thought process we are currently using.
That makes sense. And I just want to say, Henrik, you never have to apologize for complex answers, because I've yet to hear a hydrogen question that did not have complex answers, which is great. Similarly, you know, just while we're on the topic of sort of the technology and evaluation of forthcoming opportunities, we had a couple of questions around opportunities for saltwater electrolysis versus, you know, fresh water. And I know that you mentioned, you know, sort of the water input as a feedstock for clean hydrogen being, you know, a concern or a focus of some of the projects. I guess maybe this is a similar question and similar answer in that everything's on the table, but could you talk to us a little bit about, you know, if and how you've evaluated direct saltwater electrolysis, and if so, how you're thinking about, you know, the end results with brine? Just curious if that's something that's come up in your work.
Yes, that has been a topic that comes up, I would say, frequently. And I would say that if you have a Power-to-X facility or electrolysis process, one of the requirements from the electrolyzer producers is that you have to use ultra clean water, because otherwise you will degrade your equipment quite fast. This is also why that you have to purify water, and so you cannot do, to my knowledge, you don't do any salt water electrolysis. You have to clean it, and you have to clean whatever water you're going to put into the plant in order to ensure that the quality of the inputs, because that is directly linked to the quality of the output, the hydrogen generated, but also to avoid degradations. So you can use salt water, but you have to go through a process to desalination first.
Desalinate, yeah.
Desalination first, yeah, and then you could use it directly. You might also be able to use other sources of water, but the key is that you have to clean it, also to ensure from, let's say, an insurance perspective, that who has got the responsibility and has got the risk if something goes wrong. So I guess that you just need a water source that is important. So let's say if you are someone who lives in the middle of Australia, where you have a lot of PV, lots of solar, you could end up having the power requirements, but you don't have the water requirements. So you need a water source, and I think that you'll be fine. And your business case will vary from source to source. I guess would be my answer.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Henrik. I'm going to combine a couple more questions that we've got that I think are, you know, touch adjacent to the technology, some of the considerations that I know we're thinking a lot about with our burgeoning offshore wind industry here in the US. And those two things I'm going to combine are the supply chain component and the workforce development component. I know that that's been a critical focus of our early stage work around offshore wind and the hydrogen industry, because you can't build projects without the right people and without the equipment. So I'm curious, maybe we can start with the workforce piece. How is Denmark evaluating the need for workforce development, including training and other certification opportunities with regard to the Energy Islands work? Is that something that you're thinking about as you sort of plan for these large scale projects?
That is a very good question. And as you also can hear from my tone, I don't think that I have a good answer for that question. It's not a topic that my colleagues directly are working on. I think that it seems like when I talk to, let's say, the different companies who are working in this field, they are kind of grabbing all the resources and all the manpower that they can get at this point. And it's difficult to hire, let's say, skilled labor such as technicians and engineers and etc. I don't know what the plan is and how in a large scale. I don't have any answers to that, to be honest.
I would say it's also a little bit without my area of expertise, but we expect there will be a lot of people from the oil and gas industry that are used to working offshore that will translate some of that experience into working with offshore wind and Power-to-X projects as well.
Well, I would say you might have more of an answer than you think, just by virtue of you know, the value of your sort of private-public collaboration. And I think, you know, the amount of private partners that you've brought into the sphere as you look to design you know, your Energy Island strategy. I think that kind of collaboration can be really illuminating in terms of identifying the types of positions, the types of skill sets that you know you're going to need to build these projects. And I know that that's been a critical focus of the effort here in New York as well. to make sure that we aren't assuming, the types of skills and positions that we're going to have challenges filling down the road, but trying to think a bit more proactively. So I know I appreciate you guys, recognizing that that may not be your area of expertise, but I think that you've spoken to that even by virtue of highlighting the key partnerships that you've got with some of the big players that are involved in your strategy development. Let's see here. I guess one question I've got in terms of one that came up in terms of identifying, where the energy islands would be. Obviously, a lot of it has to be thinking about, renewable potential in the region, but also curious to hear, we here in the U.S. obviously our renewable penetration of renewables or percentage of renewables as a share of total generation is much lower than yours in Denmark. So curious if you're thinking about these projects or P2X conceptually, is it more about, avoiding curtailment of your, significant renewable resource? Is it about planning to overbuild or just expand the scope of new renewables that you're bringing onto the grid to account to P2X? What are sort of, maybe the key challenges that you're looking to, why P2X has emerged as such a priority for Denmark?
Well, maybe I can start with that one, Henrik, and then
please go
fill in.
Please do so.
We have some political goals of carbon neutrality, and we see Power-to-X as a critical part of reaching those goals. But as we all know, wind and solar are very fluctuating, and in Denmark we don't have any nuclear power to stabilize the system. So if we want to be completely carbon neutral, we will need to build a lot of renewable energy, and we will also need some way to store it, and we will also rely heavily on power trading with the surrounding countries. But if we should, what we see as the best way to do this is by building a lot of wind power and more than we can use ourselves in Denmark, and then export both electricity, green electricity from the wind farms, but also hydrogen and e-fuels, and then participate to the common European energy grid that way.
I think if I may add also a different angle, that could be that when I speak to some of the PTX developers in Denmark, it seems like they are also focused on developing their concepts so that they can ramp the production of hydrogen up and down depending on the price for, let's say, on electricity. So they are going to be built so that they will follow the prices, which are obviously related to the wind intensity and so on. And so you can say that if we have large, let's say, wind sources available, they can ramp up the production, and they can also ramp down. And it's probably going to be controlled automatically by the prices itself. So I guess I see it as the Power-to-X plants as a possible advantage that can help, let's say, stabilize the grid and make room for more capacity because they can consume it. Just to give you another angle.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much for your answers there. Unfortunately, there are a number of other questions there that we will not have time to get through. And I always, with the hydrogen webinar, we must end on time. It's so easy to run long. So with that, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please, Sal, and we'll close up shop here. A couple more, please. There you go. So to all our attendees and to our excellent presenters here, thank you so much for joining us for today's Learning from the Experts webinar. Once again, a reminder that the webinar recording and slides will be made available on NYSERDA's website. Please join us next time on Wednesday, February 15th for the 29th webinar here in the Learning from the Experts series. We'll be joined by John Mansalillo from Ørsted, who will discuss emergency response planning for offshore wind. You can register for future webinars through our events page at wind.ny.gov. And again, if you have any requests for future topics that you'd like to hear about in this series, please do email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov, or fill out the Learning from the Experts survey posted on our website. Henrik, Kristian, again, thank you guys so much for joining today. We really appreciate it, especially with the time difference. Thank you so much for your partnership. We look forward to continuing to work with you under the MOU as we look to decarbonize New York and Denmark. So again, thank you guys so much for joining. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.